Hello. Hope you're having a great week. We've been studying, I've been really looking forward to today, by the way. We've been studying about mentoring and discipleship, but before that happens, you have to, you wonder if someone's a believer or not, and what they put their trust in, and do they really trust Christ? And so this month, we're going to have 4 lessons about sharing your faith and sharing with others. Today's kind of an intro, and we're talking about testimony. And that's kind of how, sometimes you're just in a conversation and someone asks you and you share how you came to Christ. And so I have found that it's much easier when you're in that conversation. You kind of learn someone's background and where they come from, and sometimes it's easier if we've written something out to have it firmly into our brain, so that if we're nervous sharing with someone, it's just there and it's easier to share. You could even practice with someone or whatever. And that doesn't mean you would always share it exact word for word, but you would have your story in your head. And you can add Bible verses or examples of other things or whatever. And you might have a long time to talk with someone and share with them. And you can just tell them all sorts of things and all sorts of verses. And you might be sitting next to someone on a plane or a train or on a bench somewhere, and you have 30 seconds. So in Bible studies I've always had someone write out their testimony, the short version. So just so it's in your head. And so that would be an assignment this week for each of you to take a piece of paper and write out your testimony. You could do a short version and a long version. You could add examples. You could add Bible verses. And so today I'm going to share my 2 to 3 minute, my longer one with you real quick, just to give you an example of what I would say. And something simple that I would share with someone. And then, you can see me as a real person. I've shared different things over the last few months with you, and so some of it may be redundant, and those who know me actually know my testimony. So you may have heard it before, but for the majority of you, you don't know it. And I'm just going to share just this little brief thing, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it afterwards. So here is my 2 to 3 minute testimony. I grew up on a horse ranch in Western Washington, and my sister and I were adopted together into this family. My mom had 10 miscarriages before she adopted my sister and I. And then when I was 13, my dad had a heart attack. He fell off the tractor and died. And we had previously gone to, when I was really little, more liturgical church, and something happened and we quit going. I'm not exactly sure what. And so we just hadn't gone to church in a really long time. And because of that, the funeral director made a recommendation of a young man whose dad had died when he was young, who did lots of funerals. And so he ended up doing our funeral. And that was just a really hard time. We had to send our horses away, and different things happened, and we didn't have any income, and just really hard time for us. And this pastor, a couple months after the funeral, he came down to our farm and he invited us to come to his little country church. And we showed up, and that week they'd been memorizing Romans 12, 1 and 2 out loud as a congregation. And everybody had their Bibles with them, which was weird and new to me. And they weren't sitting in fancy pews or anything, and the church wasn't fancy. But these people were all friends, and they all knew each other. And one family came up and talked to my sister. They knew her from school, and they invited us to youth group to come that night. And we just kept coming, and we got really involved. And by summer, so it was just a few months, we all accepted Christ through this testimony in this church, basically. And that's how we came to know Christ. And it's like we needed hope, and he provided that hope for us. Okay, so that's my 2 to 3 minute one. My shorter version, I would just cut out some of the details and just share like something I could share in 30 seconds with a couple Bible verses. So this week you'll write your testimony out. Next week we're going to talk about sin and why we need God, why God sent his son, and we're going to go over some Bible verses that you can share with people. One of the big things that people will say is, well, I'm a good person, and I feel like I've done the right things, and that's why God would want me in heaven. And then we can share Bible verses like, there's none that doeth good, no, not one, and God will by no means clear the guilty. And so we can share some Bible verses with that, and just, share that, why we have a need for God. And then we'll share about God bridging that gap with Jesus. And we'll get that far next week. And then following weeks, we'll have some more examples. Sometimes it just helps to have a notebook and kind of jot all this down. And just so that you understand what you could share with others. Sometimes if you don't ever share like your need for God, or if it's something that was ever wrong in your life, people don't really see you as a real, genuine person. And we want people to see us as genuine, and we're not without sin, and we're not perfect, and we need people to see the real us, and why we need God, and God chose us for a reason. And some people's testimonies are way more detailed than others. They've gone through really, really rough things, and some people just grew up in a Christian home, and they knew scripture, and they knew they wanted Jesus, or some people are afraid of hell. There's all sorts of reasons why people accept Christ, and bottom line is we all need him. And the Bible gives us so many verses and so many examples of things. And this thing that we're doing this month is just some ways I could encourage you. You may have tons of ways that you share Christ with people. And this is by no means, necessarily the best way. It works for me. And so I just want to make that clear that, there's lots of ways and stuff. And so this is just something to encourage your heart and give you some direction so you don't feel nervous. And, everybody's unique and special, and God knew, what you needed in your life, and no one's better than anybody else. And I really look forward to this time together each week, and this is just such a foundational thing to learn this month. I hope that you all are able to watch each episode and then kind of compile it all together. So I might post some things on our site about this, and you could write them down in your notebook so that you have the different points of things that you need to go over or be aware of. And then I'd love to hear from you on some examples that you use. That would be great. And so next week, we will go over sin and God's providing Jesus as that bridge, to bridge that gap when we were separated from God. And we'll go over that next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. God bless.